Okay, I'm going to show you how to make a custom sole for any bootie that you might want to do more along the lines of a circular loom going from the bottom to the top. I have several bootie patterns that do this, but the bottoms can be a little questionable and not as accurate. If you want to make it to where it fits you more accurately, this is how you're going to do it. And the great thing is, once you're done with this, you can trace it out on some leather or faux leather, and you can actually make a bottom that you can easily glue in, that you don't have to worry about whether you're going to lose the stretch or not. You can easily glue on so that you have a nice sole and you don't have to worry about your sole developing holes. But what I'm going to do is show you how to custom make a sole. First, what you want to do is you want to put your weight on a piece of card paper, and you want to draw out the edges of your foot. Okay, and I'm doing this with my 30 peg half-inch gauge, but I'm just doing the half-inch gauge, but you can do it with whatever loom you're using. And so what I'm going to show you is how you go about this. What we're going to do is we're going to start off, after you've drawn and cut out your mold, is you're going to put it up against the pegs. And I see that 4 is what makes up our heel, which is where we're going to be starting. So we're going to start off with 4, and then we're going to need to go up to, I see 7 here. We're going to make it 8. So we're going to double it. And we're going to double it from back here up. So you're going to move it up, not quite to here, not to this section, just to the mid section to know how much you need to increase. And you count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then I'm going to add an extra peg. And that extra on either side is because it's going to shrink a little. So we're going to go up to 8. And then we know that we're going to need to increase again later on. So you'll go up midway here. And it should go up 2 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes. And then you're going to increase it one more time for this very width here, which should be 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And remember, it's going to shrink a little. And then at that point, you're going to do so many rows, and then you're going to start decreasing. And the rows is going to be where you're going to still need your mold. So what we're going to do is, since mine said it was 4, I'm going to start off just E-wrap cast on 4. Then I'm just going to get started, I'm going to flat knit those 4 that I just cast on, just to get myself started. Okay, now what I'm going to do after I've done that is I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, it'll get looser as you go along. Okay, then I'm going to increase, and all that is I'm going to just wrap the next peg and go back. Now I need to remember what my last one was, so I did a knit, purl, knit, purl. Now I'm going to start with a knit. I'm going to do the opposite of what I ended with. So I'm going to now knit because I purled that one, and then we're going to knit, purl, knit, purl, which which was a purl. Wrap the next peg. You're going to increase. Then you're going to knit, purl, knit, purl, knit that increase. Then you're going to wrap it one more time and increase over here. We finished with a knit right here, so we're going to purl it. So you're going to purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. Okay, and then you're going to wrap it again with an increase. And because we knitted last, we're going to purl. So purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Let's count and see how many we've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 is what I needed. So to make sure that I've got all of them cast on properly, so all I've got on my increases solidly in there, I can release that. I'm going to go back one more time and add in that increase over here. So my last one was and the way you know, it was a purl, and that was a knit. So if you see if it looks on the opposite side like it's a knit, you did a purl. So that looks like a knit, so I did finish with a purl. So if I finished with a purl, then I need to do a knit as my start. So knit, purl all the way across. And then I have gotten myself up to the point where I need to be. Now the great thing about this is you may not need to increase that much. You only need to increase to the point where you add up to an extra on each side of what is counted with your mold. Now you can follow my pattern exactly. I wear an 8 to 8.5, sometimes 9. And the reason why we're doing this stitch where you do the opposite is so that there's no shrinkage. It stays solidly like this. And so you're going to be working this section here next. And for my foot, it worked up with a total of 16 rows back and forth. Yours may be different, but again, if you want to just follow my pattern exactly, increase to 8, and then you're going to do 16 rows. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing the opposite of what you're finishing with and alternate between a knit and a purl like we've been doing. So we finished with a purl, and now we're going to knit, and then we're going to go purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. And you do that you do those 8 pegs for 16 rows alternating. So we finished with a purl, so we're going to knit. Now the way you're going to know the difference between whether you've knitted or purled a certain peg. This is what the knit looks like on the other side. Kind of looks like a pearl. I don't know if you can see this, but that's a knit right there. That's what a knit looks like. And what a knit looks like on the opposite side kind of looks like a pearl, and what a pearl looks like on the opposite side looks like a knit. So this peg here was a pearl, and you know that you'll need to knit it the next time through. So if you ever lose track and you want to know what you need to do next, you can always look on the inside and you'll know that this thing right here that looks like a pearl is actually a knit. So that's a knit peg, and that one's been a pearl because that looks like a knit stitch there. So it should look the opposite of what it actually is. So because this, I just purled this is a knit. I can tell because I have a horizontal strip going across the top, and I know that this is a pearl. So I need to purl this one and knit this one now. And this helps you keep up with, if you forget where you ended. That's how you can keep up. Let's go ahead and pause the video and complete as much as you can up to the point where about here, where you start to see it go out further. Yours may not. You may just not have to increase again. Every foot is different. For me, I have a narrower heel and a fatter ball. So for me, I'm going to have to increase midway. You may not have to, but it's all dependent on if your foot changes in pegs. So go ahead and do however many rows it's going to take, and what you do is you just keep measuring it with your mold. Okay, I've personally completed my 16 rows, and you can see this pattern. The great thing about this pattern also is that it looks maybe a little different on either side, but you aren't going to notice it when you put it on the bottom of a bootie. So you can make the exact same thing twice and then just flip the other one over to get the other foot. So that's the other reason for doing it with this particular stitch. So if you line it up with your mold that you've made, you should see that it's starting to line up, and you'll see that you're starting to actually need to increase. You'll see that you'll need to increase. So I'm going to spend the next couple of rows increasing. So I've done my 16 rows. I'm going to wrap the next peg as my increase, and then I'm going to knit, purl, knit, purl all the way over to the other side. Then I'm going to increase by wrapping the next peg. Then I'm going to knit and purl my way over to the other side. Then I'm going to knit my increased peg. That means I'll need to start with a purl. When I go back, so we're doing a purl, and then knit, okay, now I've officially gotten in my 10 pegs, which is where I needed to increase, and for it to fit my foot I wrote down 10 for me. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to write it down. You'll need to do however many rows, and if you want to do mine exactly, you do 10 rows. You do 6 rows. What you're going to is then your max peak is like up in here, and yours may not be, mine is. Max peak is up in here, which means I'm going to just increase by 1 on one side. So you're basically looking at through in here, which you can see is where it's gotten bigger. And that's not as big of an area as the bottom half. And so you're just going to kind of gauge it until you see where it's going to get even bigger. And so for me, that was 6 rows of 10. And then we will go from there. So go ahead and pause the video and get yourself up to that point, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I have completed my 6 rows. So I'm going to pick up my mold, line it up with the bottom, and I can tell that I'm fixing to need to increase to my extra there. And as you can see, when you go down, that it gets narrower. So while this looks like it's fine up here, it needs the extra. But you can see that it's starting to line up with my foot mold. So if you're following along with me, then you're going to increase by wrapping the next peg, and then you're going to purl knit over. Again, every foot is different. You may not have to do this. Okay, now I finished with a knit. I'm going to purl, knit my way over. I don't have to increase to 12, just to 11. You can do this on a finer gauge. You're just following your mold. You see how many pegs it takes. I did this one on one of the fine gauge looms, and with using the same technique, and it works just fine doing that. Okay, now we've got in our extra. We finished with a purl. Now you're going to do 6 rows. You're going to do 6 rows of the 11. So I finished with a purl. I'm going to start with a knit and purl. So you're going to do 6 rows of 11, and then we will start our decreasing to round off our toe areas. Go ahead and pause the video. And if you're following along with me, complete 6 rows, and if you're not, complete however many rows to get you to where you are fixing to need to go down the toe area here. Pause the video, complete that much, and we'll go from there. Okay, I have completed this much, and I'm pretty sure I'm fixing to be ready to start my... Here I am at the end. Yep, I'm ready to start my decreasing down to the toe area. So what you want to keep in mind is wherever your last increase was, to get the widest part of your foot, make sure that you start on that end with the decrease. Because if you noticed on there, it increases more going out this way, and so that extra increase was there, but you're going to need to decrease from that direction. So I did my extra over here. I'm going to move that over. Then I'm going to actually knit it, those two together. I'm going to knit my decreases. Then I'm going to look and see what I've got, and it looks like my last one was a purl, so I'm going to do a knit purl all the way across. And basically what I'm going to be doing is decreasing by every other row until I personally am down to 5 stitches. And I would say it's probably going to generally be about 1 or 2 more stitches than the heel area, which is a good gauge. So I finished with a knit. I know I'm going to need to purl to the end. I'm going to purl, start to purl, and knit to the end. Now I'm going to decrease again, and I'm going to want to knit the two together. So on my decreases, it's always going to be a knit. Then I'm going to look in, and I did a knit there, so it's going to be a purl. I have to glue that one back in. Put some pressure on these pegs. They do pretty good. And take and move that one over to the next peg. You're going to decrease that, and then you're going to knit them together. Then I'll look at what that is. That's a purl, so we're going to knit, purl. Okay, and then we're going to purl. Pardon the rabbit in the background. Okay, then we're going to move that one over and decrease again. Then we're going to remember that we're going to knit those two together. Checking what we did. That was a knit, so we're going to purl it. Knit all the way across. Then we're going to purl, knit all the way across. Decrease, move it over to the next peg, knit the two together. Look to see what your last thing was, which was a purl. So you're going to knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. Then you're going to purl, knit, purl, knit on the way to the end. Move that one over. This looks like we're down to 5, so this is our last row, and then we're going to cast off. So go ahead and knit those two together. Last one was a knit, so we're going to purl, knit, purl, knit. Now we're going to cast off because we're down to 5. So whenever you get to the point that you have down on your toes, you should be able to pretty much have it measured up. And there is mine. And it lines up. You can't even see it. So I'm going to cast off. So I'm going to knit 2, move the second stitch over to the first, toss the bottom loop over, move over, knit the second stitch, move it to the top, toss the bottom loop over, move over, knit, move it over, toss the bottom loop over, move over, knit, toss the bottom loop over, and knit. Go ahead and snip your ends and pull through. And that's it. That's how you make a sole. There you go. Pretty neat, huh? So then you take your mold, put it at the bottom, and it should pretty darn well line up. See? See, there you go. You see where it lines up. And that is actually how you make a mold. And use your mold to make a sole of a bootie that you can go in, and you can take some leather or fake leather or anything that you might like, trace around this, soften up the edging, and then you can either sew it or glue it down after you've attached it to, say, a shoe like this. Like you can see where I attach this. I can go in and I can now glue or sew on some leather, and that way I have a bottom that won't wear through when walking around in these. So that is how you make a custom sole for the bottom of a bootie, and the great thing is it's pretty similar on both sides, so that when you make two exactly the same, all you have to do is flip it over, and you have your left foot, flip it over, and you have your right foot, and that way you don't have to do anything special to get the two separate feet. So that's it. That's how you make a bottom, bootie bottom, using a trace out.